What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Hear the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameday.com. We're here live on a wonderful, fantastic Tuesday afternoon, and we've got a handful of things to talk about this lunchtime here in the afternoon show of Hear the Spear. We're going to talk Trevor Jackson, a Florida State quarterback entering the transfer portal, and what that means for the Seminoles. We're also going to talk about another former offensive starter entering the transfer portal as well. Talk a couple things, some quick hitters on Thomas Castellanos, almost going to another SEC school instead of coming to Florida State this season. And then we're going to talk about a prediction between Florida State and Alabama in their 2025 season opener. And then we'll finish off with some basketball scoop from VZ. With me this afternoon is Austin VZ, our lead basketball writer. And all the way to the other side is Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief. Gentlemen, how we doing?
It's good to be back. Final week of spring practice for Florida State. They'll be going on, later today, Tuesday night, Thursday, and then the final scrimmage of the spring on Saturday. So, yeah, definitely a lot to get in here over these next couple of days.
I'm just glad that the NBA season's almost over, at least for the Mavericks. It's been a painful season. Got no sleep, but we're almost through it. Portland season's still going on strong for Florida State basketball, but we're working through it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little busy on the basketball side. Tiny bit. Just saw Luke Laux was speaking at a booster event along with two Florida State's new coordinators, Tony White and Gus Malzahn. Coach JP as well, representing the special teams. But I think we get right into it, gentlemen. Before we get started, though, as always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you're on YouTube right now, hit the like button. Definitely, if you have any topics or you have questions, throw them in the chat. We'll bring them here on the screen and discuss with the guys. But let's start off here. Florida State quarterback planning to enter the transfer portal. And this is one that I don't think on this show, at least specifically, we talked a whole ton about. But this is Trevor Jackson, a quarterback. Would you class him as practically a preferred walk-on whenever he came in, not on scholarship, right, Dustin?
Yeah.
But yeah, had tons of offers. Actually, had a good amount of offers from SEC, ACC, Big Ten, and Group of Five programs, but ended up picking Florida State and playing as a preferred walk-on. He appeared in just one game where he had a 2-yard rush on the final play against Charleston Southern. But, to me, looking at this, first, let's just talk about Trevor Jackson. Someone, like I said, we didn't talk about a whole ton on this show. He was not expected to be someone to see the field a ton, definitely. And the year prior, when you had Luke Kromenhoek still on the roster, you had Brock Glenn as well, and you brought in DJU through the transfer portal. But now you brought in a true freshman, Kevin Spurrier, which we'll talk about in just a second, that probably impacted and made this decision go further with Trevor Jackson wanting to hit the portal.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a major surprise for Florida State. Like you said, Logan, I mean, you've got a really good young prospect in that room, and Kevin Spurrier, who seems like he's hit the ground running so far at the college level, really impressed the coaching staff as well as other players this spring. And I mean, some of the other quarterbacks, we've heard Tommy and Brock speak very highly of Kevin Spurrier, but Trevor Jackson was a developmental guy coming into Florida State, had previously been committed to Ole Miss during his recruitment, had a pretty good showing at the Elite 11 leading up to his senior season. So, it seemed like a good option for Florida State to be able to bring him in as a preferred walk-on. But as everyone knows, sometimes those things just don't work out. And especially in this day and age of the sport where quarterbacks are looking to get on the field, faster than ever. I think Trevor Jackson, he saw the guys ahead of him, and he figured, if he wants to play quicker at the college level, he's probably going to have to find a new home. So, wish him the best of luck. But Florida State, they do have 3 quality quarterbacks going into this 2025 season.
Mm-hmm. And go ahead, BZ.
I was just going to say, I'm not losing any sleep over this. Like, I saw the notification come through, and I know a lot of people are high on his upside. I never really saw it. There's a reason. I mean, yes, he had offers, but there's a reason he ended up walking on in the first place and couldn't really crack a Florida State quarterback rotation that was abysmal last year. So, I mean, hopefully he goes somewhere and succeeds. I'm just not concerned that was going to happen here at Florida State.
Yeah, and I mean, last year, for the most part, he pretty much commanded the scout team, wasn't getting necessarily a bunch of reps with those 1, 2s, and 3s. on offense. And, he was a guy that we didn't really hear much about this spring when the quarterback room was discussed. And I think that's, probably another thing that led to that departure.
I'm going to ask you, Dustin, listen, watching him in practices, because as people there not on the ground, not at the practices, what did he look like? Because, we'd hear things, and I think, to me, you always have that on any roster. I feel like, no matter professional or the collegiate, where you have a quarterback that's like a third string or a second string, like, oh my gosh, this guy is impressive. Look at him move. And that's kind of the feel that I would hear from just other outlets. And, I, like Beezy said, like, that's not a big loss here for FSU. I know everybody wanted to see another quarterback go out there last year. Like, Beezy was saying, I mean, the quarterback play was awful. So kind of anybody going back there you would like to see, but I still wasn't, Trevor Jackson wasn't someone where he's going to be your QB1 or, maybe QB2 even. That just wasn't the case. But what do you look like? What do you look like in practices, since everybody wanted to hear what our practice reports were last year and the team ended up going 2-10?
Yeah, when you have a below average starting quarterback, everyone's favorite player is the backup. And they're like, well, if that guy gets in, everything is going to be instantly better. But, Trevor Jackson, for the most part, I mean, this is a guy very athletic. I mean, he's able to use those legs. He's definitely a dual threat, and, made some fun plays out there on the scout team with his legs. But I would say, for the most part, the arm is a work in progress. You'll have some throws where you're like, man, I mean, he just slung that thing, and then you'll get, 3 or 4 inconsistent passes where the placement isn't right or it doesn't get quite to the wide receiver. So I think that's really the biggest thing for him is just making that next step where he's making those throws play after play rather than just every once in a while.
And then going to Kevin Sperry, someone that I feel like out of the entire quarterback room, gentlemen, I feel like we've talked about Kevin Sperry more than Castellanos since he's arrived, and then also to Brock Glenn. I mean, that's kind of just been the name that's been brought up quite a bit, not even just from us, but, you look at someone who's been talking about him a lot, and that's really important to point out, is Gus Malzahn, your new offensive coordinator, and he doesn't usually go out and say name. And, Kevin Sperry has been getting a lot of buzz, and that most likely too, has seen Kevin get more of those opportunities and move up in the depth chart. That's where, it makes sense for Trevor to go find another opportunity, which I'm sure he certainly will. Just not having game tape out there won't help a whole ton. But I'm sure the coaching staff at Florida State will put in a good word. And, like you said, there a lot of great effort too, and what he was able to put in there on the scout team for Florida State. Let's jump over to another guy that is on the offensive side of the ball that is planning to enter the transfer portal. This news came yesterday on Monday, and this is offensive lineman Jalen Early. This is coming from On3's Hayes Fawcett. Redshirt junior, played and actually started in 6 games in 2024, played in a total of 8. Was battling some injuries as well. I feel like the entire offensive line was anyways, all across the board. But over 3 seasons with Florida State, he appeared in 18 games and had 7 total starts. He was someone, Dustin, whenever I was with you, I just remember going back to the practices. I want to say in 2023. Was it 2 or 3?
3.
Was it 3? Jalen Early got some, hard coaching from Alex Atkins. Alex Atkins was really hands-on with him, trying to develop him, and that whole Alex Atkins conversation and development that's not for another show. You could just go back to
just wait for it.
Our library.
It's gonna be 2 minutes.
But it was someone that had to be coached in a really hands-on way, and Jalen Early, I thought, grew from that, and there's a reason why he got more opportunities and ended up starting the amount of games that he did last year. Injuries didn't help him as much. But he's deciding to enter the transfer portal there. Florida State obviously brought in a handful of other transfers coming in this upcoming season that are going to be potential starters. So you weren't looking for Early to be a starter in this upcoming season, but would have been a nice depth piece for you with that experience. And you never know what could come about with Herb Hand now being on staff and Alex Atkins no longer being in Tallahassee. So he might have found a little bit of optimism to where he could find growth and strides. But right now, he's deciding and electing to plan to enter the transfer portal.
Well, if you're talking about the hard coaching part, then yeah, I definitely remember the 2022 days in Jacksonville over there at UNF. That was tough times. But 2023, I thought he really began to show some promising strides in practice, and you would have him out there in some of those drills, not necessarily the 11 on 11, but some of those other drills that Florida State's offensive line runs against the defensive line during practice. And he was able to hold his own against, he even had some fun battles with Jared Verse, but some of those veteran defensive ends on the roster, this was when he was spending a lot of time at right tackle. But someone that came into Florida State, highly recruited, chose FSU over offers from Ohio State, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, and a bunch of other Power 5 programs. So there were some really high hopes for what he could do. But he also came into a room that also had a lot of veterans that were already in front of him. I think we can all remember that, even though some of those guys regressed in 2024. But in 2022 and 2023, you still had some solid pieces on that offensive line that hadn't yet fallen to the level that we saw last fall. And, Jalen Early was finally able to break into that rotation in 2024. You kind of mentioned it, Logan saw 6 starts, made 3 at right tackle, 3 at right guard. I agree with you going into 2025. This is a guy who maybe not necessarily a projected starter, but someone at the very minimum who was going to fight for a big role in that 2 deep. And as we can see, or as we've seen, can play on the inside or on the outside. But at the same time, only 2 years of eligibility remaining for him in his college career. And, he's at the point where he's a guy who wants to be in that starting role, showcase himself over these final 2 years, and came in a little bit limited in the spring. I don't know if we noted it last week or if we already passed it by that point whenever we had the show, but Mike Norvell mentioned that Jalen Early was among some offensive linemen that were making some progress, actually able to do a little bit on the practice field last week. And I think it was definitely a surprise for Florida State to see him enter the portal, with the role that he was projected to play on this team in 2025. And, you go back to that 2022 recruiting class where Florida State. You want to do it, or you want me to do it?
I had it pulled up. If you don't,
I've got it pulled up. But hey, go ahead. Easy. Okay.
I was just gonna say, first of all, I'm not gonna lose any sleep again over an Alex Atkins recruit leaving. He's been corrupted enough by bad coaching. But yeah, this 2022 recruiting class that was very heralded, especially by someone on this show. I'm not going to say any names, but starting with Jalen Early was the most heralded prospect, followed closely by Julian Armella. Neither developed, have transferred. Kayshawn Sapp transferred. Dachi Richardson transferred. And Tavius Woody switched to defense, then transferred. And then Kanaya Charlton transferred. Every single one of those guys transferred. A lot of them happened after 1 or 2 seasons. Now, all 7 of those guys are gone.
And Charlton, I believe, no longer playing college football. But even outside the offensive line, you look at the rest of this 2022 recruiting class.
It's not great.
17 players, we just went through 6 of them. Then you've got Sam McCall transferred, AJ Duffy transferred.
He transferred a lot too. He's on his 5th school by now?
Yeah.
4 or 5. Obviously AZ, the only guy in this class going to the NFL so far. Daniel Lyons, Aaron Hester still on the roster. Ayobami Tafase transferred, Rodney Hill transferred, Brian Courtney transferred, Bishop Thomas transferred, Omar Graham Jr. still on the roster, starter for Florida State likely in 2025. Jarrell Powers transferred. So
you get 4 people?
Yeah, what is that? 4 out of 17 that have actually done some positive things at Florida State.
Not great, Bob.
And that 2023 class, not looking any better for Florida State at the moment. So, you go back and look at some of these classes where, like Austin was saying, there was some optimism from fans and from the coaching staff that those could be players that help Florida State in the future. But now a couple years later, those classes have done practically nothing for the Seminoles.
Yeah, not pretty. I was going to say, we are on the last week of spring ball. Like Dustin was saying, they will have their scrimmage on Saturday. But, I was just going to note, what are y'all looking to hear? I feel like we've just been hearing from Mike Norvell. It's actually been pretty clear that it's been a roller coaster of a ride, at least last week was, where wasn't pleased at all with one of the practices. Then the next practice, he
Mhm.
felt a little bit better. Then that third one of the week, he felt like the response was fully there and energy was there. And he really liked it, just going off and listening to that interview just a little bit ago. But still feels like, to me, this team is trying to understand itself a little bit more. I don't know how to really describe it, but I feel like physicality wise, that's something Gus Malzahn is pushing very hard, because that's exactly what you're going to need in this run game. You've got to have physicality, and that's something that has been lacking from Florida State's side. I don't know if it's primarily the offensive side, offensive line. It just depends on where that's at. I think it's all across the board in your wide receiver blocking, tight end blocking, running backs playing with physicality. I think that's certain. That's definitely something that he's, pointing out to. On the defensive side, though, we've been hearing things definitely from these scrimmages inside of the practices of guys flying around on that side of the ball with Tony White, which is great to hear. But, I think, and we'll do next week, most likely, once, the spring camp wraps up, we'll jump into seeing, which position groups might need to look into the transfer portal and add talent. But I think the biggest thing to me is just still losing guys on injuries this spring definitely sucked and hurt you. And I think that's really tough when you brought in 2 new coordinators. And then the understanding of your mentality, your physicality, your accountability, your leadership. I think that's something that is still going to be something to work on going into, the summer and your fall camp.
Yeah, I think from a physicality standpoint, it's really the offensive side of the ball that has struggled more so far this spring. And I think a lot of that really just goes to the injuries. I mean, Florida State has been beat up front. Obviously, Gunnar Hansen has been limited since the beginning of the spring. Jalen Early was as well, but he's not going to be out there for this final week. And, we've seen some of these other guys. Micah Pettis wasn't able to participate in that second scrimmage. TJ Ferguson was getting back into action after an injury last season. Same thing with Richie Leonard. So, I mean, some of those veteran pieces that you were hoping that would probably be up there with the ones, at the very least, the twos during these practices, missing in action. And that's forcing a lot of younger guys to get some first team reps. One of the practice videos the other day, you had Lucas Simmons in there at first team left tackle. And we've heard Mike Norvell talk about Jonathan Daniels getting first team reps. A lot of mentions of Andre Otto as well up there with that starting 5. So you're kind of just all over the place due to these injuries. And then it's the same thing in that wide receiver core. I mean, so many guys are beat up at the moment and going to be out for the remainder of the spring. I think that's really hindered the offense's progress over these last couple of weeks. But, going back to your point, Mike Norvell did seem pretty happy with the response from that Tuesday to Thursday practice. And then, they got the same thing during that back-to-back day on Friday, where it seemed like it was a pretty competitive day, a physical day, and he was happy with how the offense came out and competed with the defense. And, we've seen some of those clips surfacing around, look like a lot of goal line work and a lot of physicality out there for Florida State, and they answered that call. So we'll see if they're able to do that here over these final 2 practices and then into that scrimmage. And Mike Norvell did note that some of those offensive linemen, the veterans that have been beat up, are getting back into action. So we'll see if maybe that helps the offense get up to a better level these last couple of days.
Yeah, and I feel like you would like to get some kind of report card from those potential starters going into this next season in the spring right now, because you can get a good feel about your running game, which to me has been something pointed out that has been a letdown so far. But I think that has to go to, like we were just talking about, your starters, projected starters not being out there, but also to, I don't know if it really relies too on the offensive line as much. I'm concerned right now as we speak, it's April 15th, but a little concerned about the run game. I think there's a reason why they put a lot of bread and a lot of NIL money and making a big flip there with Usman Kroma coming in, but that's also a little concerning because you're relying on a true freshman to be your pure RB1 potentially a few games into the season, because I don't think you're getting what you really want from Roydell Williams, who's also got banged up once again. And I honestly don't feel too strongly about him as a player. And then Cam Davis, not seeing the strides as much as you would like to see maybe from the spring itself. And you're hearing more about, Jalen Lucas and freaking Randy Pittman at the H-back position. playing with more physicality and finding holes a little bit better. It's just a little concerning. I mean, we've heard about Samuel Singleton and such, but I think a lot of things are going to be relied on a true freshman coming in. D-Lou, does that worry you a little bit?
A little bit, but outside of 2024, I would say for the most part, I mean, Mike Norvell, David Yak Johnson, they fielded quality running back groups. So, I'm still cautiously optimistic that they can bounce back in 2025 with the guys that they do have. I mean, Roy Dell was pretty solid at Alabama until that injury last season at FSU kind of kept him out for the entirety of that 2024 campaign. Jalen Lucas, I mean, was a very explosive threat at Indiana. And if he can get back from that lower leg injury, I think the sky is really the limit for him to be a dynamic playmaker on this FSU offense. And then, I've been encouraged by what we've heard from Samuel Singleton because he was another guy who we really saw that speed last season. I know it was mostly on special teams. And, everyone thinks back to that kickoff return touchdown that he had against Duke. But, that still encourages me that the light is kind of turning on a little bit. He's ready to become more of a consistent playmaker during his third year at Florida State. Now, I will say what I do want to hear is more encouraging developments around what Cam Davis is doing going into his second season, because obviously that transition from quarterback to running back has been a little bit difficult. And I mean, vision is absolutely crucial in this new running attack that Gus Malzahn is instituting at Florida State. And, that's going to be an area where he needs to grow immensely during fall camp to make sure that he's in that 2 deep once we get to the 2025 season. But, Chroma is talented enough to come in and make a immediate impact for Florida State. I would say I'd be a little bit concerned if, he gets to FSU in July and he's already back there as your starter in game one. So something to watch throughout fall camp. Can these running backs continue to rise to the challenge?
Mm-hmm. Hopefully so. I mean, we'll get a whole lot. Like, we're waiting on guys too in the wide receiver room. We'll see if Deuce Robinson is going to be available back for the scrimmage. Squirrel White, too. We're seeing some practice footage from him. He's getting out there, getting into some rotation. I'm just interested to see how of a full go he'll be in the scrimmage, and just a handful of others, too, as well, that we'll be monitoring and trying to get some scoop from as well in this last and final spring scrimmage on Saturday. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. We'll have quotes from coordinators along with Mike Norvell afterward. One thing, there was a comment here as well, and I keep sort of forgetting about him. Thomas Castellanos, his run game threat is his strongest talent. And here Matt's saying from Facebook, we now have a very mobile and capable quarterback that helps tremendously when looking at opening the run game RPO and designed runs. And of course, that's something that whenever he was coming out of high school, talking about Castellanos here, he was heavily recruited just because of his run game. And honestly, we're putting him back there as a running back, not even a quarterback. And looking at what Gus Malzahn, which I'm about to lead into here, in this last year or in this transfer portal, he almost went to Auburn. He talked with ACC Network's Gramlich and the McLean show there, and was talking about who he was going to be picking to go play next at the school of his choice. And he brought up his relationship with Gus Malzahn, and originally he was leaning towards going to Auburn, but had a phone call with Gus Malzahn, and Castellanos said, "There's no way I could say no," said it's a childhood dream school. Also mentioned his cousin, who was a great here at Florida State with 2013 national champion Devontae Freeman. Almost won himself to a Super Bowl there with the Falcons. They wouldn't have blown that damn game. But pretty interesting there, though. Castellanos saying that he almost went over to the Tigers with Auburn, and Gus Malzahn flipped him over to FSU.
Oh, but I thought, everyone thought Florida State could get a better quarterback in the portal. Says a lot when you got a team like Auburn, who's got one of the most explosive offenses in the country, pursuing Tommy Castellanos in the portal there. But I also think it says a lot about his relationship with Gus Malzahn and his belief, his fit in that offense that Gus runs when, Gus gives him a call and he's like, all right, well, Florida State it is. And I know Florida State, being a dream squad of high school, had to help in that equation. But he also knows he gets to go back into an offense that he's already played in with a coach that he's already familiar with and knows what is going to demand and expect for him on the football field. So, Tommy Castellanos is looking to bounce back after that 2024 season at Boston College, where, he made some improvements with his arm, but his legs, obviously, for whatever reason, didn't work out in that system that Bill O'Brien brought to the Eagles. And it seems like, it's been a little bit inconsistent at times for Florida State this spring, but with that fit, I think there should only be optimism that he can do some really big things, not only with that arm, but then getting those legs back to where they were closer to that 2023 season where, he was just making some absolutely silly plays every Saturday that you saw popping up as highlights on SportsCenter. Florida State, they want to bring that guy back in 2025 and unleash Tommy Castellanos on the rest of the ACC.
Yeah, and for the reference, Auburn did heavily chase quarterbacks in the transfer portal, ended up getting Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma. So that tells you what they thought of Tommy Castellanos, if that's who they were deciding between. I thought the more interesting part of that interview was him saying that he was basically forced to go away from the running game last year under Bill O'Brien, which is what we were saying. You look at the numbers, and when he committed, it's like Bill O'Brien just doesn't like mobile quarterbacks, and that's what he was doing at Boston College, was trying to force him into being a pocket passer. That's just not what Castellanos is. He's this dual threat quarterback that can really make plays with his legs, and when you take that away from him, he's just not going to be the same. I think getting in a system where he's allowed to use his legs more will help. We'll just have to see if the rest of the offense develops around him.
And to your point, Bill O'Brien did the same thing with Jalen, Jalen Milroe at Alabama, and now, a little bit over a week from now, Milroe is going to be drafted as a quarterback in that 2025 NFL draft
with an NFL draft invite, which shocked a lot of people because they really narrowed the pool this year. I think it's like 13 names this year or something crazy like that, and Jalen Milroe is on that list.
Mm-hmm. That means night one potential, but I definitely think he'll be a day two guy at the very least.
I agree. It was just interesting.
I wonder, I'm just going back to like Thomas Castellanos when Bill O'Brien came in, was hired as Boston College's head coach. I just wonder what that conversation was coming in. Like, hey, Bill's saying to Tommy, like, hey, I'm going to run you this way. This is how it's going to change and the style that you're going to be playing quarterback. And maybe they agreed on that, or I don't know. It just makes it interesting to where now you see how heavy the transfer portal is, where Tommy could have easily said, all right, I'm going to leave and, get out of Boston College, but he ended up staying, trying to give it a shot, maybe potentially. I don't know. It just depends on what went behind closed doors there, but just interesting because I would imagine when Bill O'Brien coming in, any coach coming in, they're going to keep it real and say, hey, this is how I'm going to use you, and this is how I'm going to try to develop you as this. And I just wonder, either was told that way or wasn't planned going into the season. I don't know, but it was just it's kind of like surprising to see that Thomas Castellanos, stayed for a decent amount of time after Bill O'Brien was out there. I always wonder about behind the scenes kind of stuff,
Yeah. And I think he was pretty committed to that program. And you look at what he did in 2023, had one of the best campaigns in program history for a quarterback at Boston College. And I think he just wanted to continue trying to build on that with the Eagles, and even with the switch in offense, just try to do the best that he could. But, whenever a new coach comes in and he goes away from his best player's top skill set, it just doesn't really make any sense to me. You're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, where I think really as a coach coming in, you see what you have, you adapt your system to what you have. And that's really the difference between a good coach and, a stubborn coach like we know Bill O'Brien is.
Yep. I want to go to one more thing here that I wanted to bring up to you guys. And this is coming from 247 Sports, Brad Crawford, where he gave his score prediction all the way in April. Score prediction, though, for Florida State versus Alabama. Right now, the line for the Seminoles is plus 11.5. So 11.5.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. First off, isn't that crazy? Is it crazy?
It's a big line in April.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's that crazy, to be honest.
No, not too crazy.
I think Vegas is seeing Florida State as, get proof of something. You went 2-10 last year.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, Alabama wasn't to the standard that Alabama of the past was in their first year after Nick Saban, but Florida State was 2-10. Even if we think that they'll triple their win total, that's 6 wins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Florida State, they didn't cover that 11.5 very much last season. But at the same
They
time,
didn't score 11.5 a lot last year.
Alabama, I mean, a lot of questions there too. We just talked about it. Jalen Milroe moving on to the 2025 NFL draft. A couple of other Alabama players going to be selected this weekend. So, I mean, they've got some questions of their own to answer. And you got to think you're going to be breaking in a quarterback. I think they were talking about it earlier this week, and Alabama offensive coordinator Ryan Grubbs kind of made it seem like Ty Simpson has a leg up on that starting quarterback competition exiting the spring for the Crimson Tide. And I mean, this is a guy who hasn't started a game at the college level, has only thrown 50 passes in 3 years. And the first time that he could potentially command that Alabama offense going to be on the road, week 1, night game in a revamped Doak Campbell Stadium. That's going to be rocking, going to have some optimism with everything that Florida State has done to revamp its coaching staff and roster last season. So, I don't think you can necessarily discredit the home field advantage that Florida State could possibly have going into this game. And also new offense, new defense. You're not really going to have a lot of tape on what Florida State's players look like in those systems. Could have some surprises out there. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, we can't give it out anymore. We can't give away the game plans anymore. The media, not there. Unless they allow you, though, Dustin, and the rest of our staff to fall camp and practices, which I do not think is going to be the case.
No, probably not.
I think,
but hey, I'll take sleeping in because I mean, man, those summer practices at 8 a.m.
That is so rough. That is so rough. Someone in the comments, please roast them. I know a lot of people get up at 5 a.m., 4 a.m. roast.
5 straight days, though.
That is tough. That is tough. But this is what Brad Crawford predicted: 34-17, Alabama. The Seminoles get rocked and the season opener. But I think too, if we're looking at the line as well, I mean, Kalen DeBoer, disappointing finish there last year for the Crimson Tide. There's a lot of pressure on his shoulder. I mean, no matter what, being Alabama's head coach, you're always going to have the pressure on you. But you can't go back to Tuscaloosa and lose to what everybody would know as FSU's 2-10 season last year. He would get absolutely shredded coming back there. This is actually what Crawford said. He said Kalen DeBoer would not be able to remove the stench of a season opening loss to Florida State upon his return to Tuscaloosa if the Crimson Tide fail. Considering last year's disappointing finish, Alabama is a marked program. Most are anticipating a rebound. So that's on Kalen DeBoer. Here's on Mike Norvell, saying Mike Norvell has another portal-infused roster with the Seminoles, and after the faceplant in 2024, would love to get off on the right foot against a national brand. However, this is arguably Florida State's second toughest game of the year outside of a road trip to Clemson in November. Any kind of comments here from Crawford? Agree, disagree, hardly agree?
Just strong language. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, the stench was pretty funny. I agree with what he's saying. I mean, all the pressure is going to be on Alabama to not fall flat in this game. If Florida State even goes into this game and looks competitive, like they lose by a field goal or a touchdown, I feel like a lot of Florida State fans would go, okay, maybe we have something going forward for the rest of the season. If they lose by 25 or 30, then you're like, okay, here comes another 2-10, 3-9 kind of season. But if they show some competitiveness and Alabama looks like the flatter team, I think Florida State fans would feel a little better about their chances.
So you're kind of looking for something like that 2021 Notre Dame game, just not the 3 games that followed it.
Yeah, just definitely not the Jacksonville State game after.
Absolutely not. And I got to give credit. Got to give credit here to Gus Malzahn. I mean, this is his job. But Gus Malzahn has faced Alabama plenty of times in his career, being Auburn's former head coach. When he's talking physicality, I think he's trying to set the bar, set it right now to what you're about to get your ass into whenever you are going to be facing Alabama when they show up. Because physicality at the line, if you don't have that, which I'm projecting to probably be a primetime game in Doak Campbell Stadium, if you don't have that on that Saturday night, it's over. You won't last. You're not going to last a quarter, 2 quarters. Definitely if we have any kind of resemblance of last year, which I hope is completely gone. But when Gus is talking physicality, there might be pretty decent right now and getting to where he thinks they need to be, but you've got to take it up a different notch. And, he knows the best. He's faced him so many times, gentlemen, and I do like that Gus is making sure that is pressed very hard on every individual on this roster going into this upcoming season, because it has to start off strong in week 1.
He's faced them and he's won. I mean, plenty of times. I would imagine he's got one of the better records against Nick Saban of college football coaches out there that coach against the legend while he was still at Alabama. And I mean, Mike Norvell has mentioned Alabama by name a handful of times this spring during these press conferences. So Florida State's coaching staff and the roster as well, they know what this game represents. They know the challenge in front of them. And if they're able to come out and shock Alabama to begin that 2025 season, I mean, that's a ton of momentum, a ton of confidence. And I think confidence that was lost in 2024, that played a big role in the season unfolding how it did on the field. I don't think Florida State was necessarily less talented than some of the teams that they faced, but they just didn't have that belief. They didn't have that confidence that we necessarily saw during that 2023 season where, hey, you remember Florida State went 13-0, but they were down by double digits 4 different times, and they came back. And, you know, one of those was on the road in Death Valley, on the road in Gainesville at Florida, and they were able to fight back from those deficits just because they believed that they could. And you didn't have that last year, so I think it's important for Florida State, you know, maybe, I mean, to beat Alabama, obviously, but at the very minimum, to be competitive enough where you don't lose confidence and you still believe, hey, we can have a special season, even if this one necessarily didn't go our way that night.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And one last thing here, I think when we're talking about the offense, what gives me some good hope and optimism is you do have a quarterback that's vocal, that is going to go over, make sure guys are accountable. We've been hearing that about practices and in the scrimmages. He's going to wide receivers. Hey, this is where we messed up on the route. This is what we've got to correct. This is how we got to improve. And also, too, I would imagine, too, at the offensive line, speaking with them, I think that's going to play a different kind of mentality than what you had last year. That just wasn't the case. And going in with Castellanos, a guy that's very vibrant. He's going to let you know how he feels. He's communicative. That's exactly what I feel like if you're flipping the switch and trying to get into 2025 with a different mentality, at least on the offensive side, it's good to have that at the quarterback position. Someone that's not quiet, someone that is just keeping to themselves. As a quarterback, you are the leader of the team. And, you know, Mike Norvell has pressed very hard for this to be a player's team, a player-led team. And, you know, Castellanos is someone that is doing that as we speak. And, I know we haven't heard a whole ton of things about him throughout the spring, but I think that is to be expected a lot whenever you are building a foundation as a new coach, as practically a new coaching staff coming in, but with Gus Malzahn as a new coordinator. When you're building the foundation, little things like that, it takes a while to where you get to a point to, okay, now we can set and take off with these different kind of schemes, different plays, explosiveness, all these different type of opportunities. Definitely whenever you also don't have a ton of your passing attack available, except for your tight end room that has stayed healthy throughout this whole spring. So we will go through next week's show, though, and talk through the transfer portal here. We'll see, too, we're expected to see more attrition from Florida State's roster as well. So we'll keep you guys updated here on the show. Make sure you hit the like button. Also, make sure you hit the subscribe button as well, but we'll probably go position by position, take a look at those and see, if Florida State wants to go jump in and add to its roster through this spring transfer portal window. Gentlemen, let's finish off the show with some basketball. I know we don't have a whole ton, VZ, this week because we did record a little bit earlier than per usual, but run us through a couple things that have been going on over there on the basketball side.
Yeah, a couple targets off the board. Most importantly, DeMarco Minor, point guard from Oregon State, was expected to visit Florida State over the weekend. I don't think that visit actually happened. Ended up committing to Pitt yesterday, I believe it was. But they are JUCO prospect. Isaac Garrett is committing on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, 5 p.m. Mountain Time, where he's based.
That's tonight.
It is. Yeah. Just for people that are maybe listening later in the weekend. He may be already committed. But he's decided between Florida State, Cal, and Oakland, of all schools. I think I'd be pretty surprised if it ended up not being Florida State. They had high school prospect Cam Miles on campus this week. Former Temple commit, plays at IMG Academy. And they've got a visit coming in from UMass Lowell. Martin Somerville was the American East Rookie of the Year. He's expected to be on Florida State's campus on Thursday. They've already had one Lowell product come through the program, and Terrence Mann, who's now working for the program in a technical sense. So it'd be cool to see a UMass Lowell kid come in. Those are the main players to talk about. But to me, the biggest news is former Florida State assistant Charlton Young leaving Dennis Gates at Missouri to be an assistant at Miami.
What a slap in the face.
I mean, wow. I love you, CY, but Miami? I mean, he's from the area. He's from Carroll City. He's from the 305. So I understand. But to go from an associate head coach in the SEC to, he might be an associate head coach at Miami too. I'd have to find out. But definitely a little interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I love CY. Heck of a recruiter, heck of a coach. I mean, as bright of a personality as you can ever be around in the business. But hey, man.
Tough.
Now he's getting booed.
Come on, Chief.
Following Matthew Cleveland. How'd it work for Matthew Cleveland? So hey, wish him all the best. Wish him all the best. It might be Miami, but hey, gotta pay the bills, and that's just what happens. But I think that's it for this week's show. Like I said, we'll have a good handful amount to talk about. We'll talk about Florida State's last scrimmage. We'll talk transfer portal if there is any attrition further for FSU. We'll note on that. Also, too, some portal guys or some positions that the Seminoles might want to jump into and make some additions before Florida State, as we just talked about, kicks off against Alabama. All right, that's going to do it. Y'all enjoy the rest of y'all's week, and we'll talk to you guys next week on Hear the Spear. Peace.